Hi there. Welcome to The Gathering. I'm David Ault, and I want you to know that I understand your fatigue. So pause for a moment when I say that. I understand your fatigue, and I want you to now maybe bring up your fatigue, kind of set it here on the table, this metaphoric table in front of us, and we're going to talk about it. We're not going to try to make it go away. We're not going to try to pretend it's not there or that it's not affecting us. Let's talk about it. So, fatigue is a shared experience. One of the things that's psychologically helpful about that is to change the language just a little bit. And instead of calling it my fatigue or my weariness or my overwhelm, to call it the fatigue or the weariness or the overwhelm, as if it's the shared experience within all of humanity. There is this thing called fatigue. There is this thing called weariness, and each of us must enter into the experience of that. It's kind of like part of the costume that we have to adorn ourselves with because we agreed to come and play this game called being human. And so it's not that we're doing anything wrong. It's that we're going along the steps of participating in the duality and the feeling and the overwhelm of what it means to have to be human. We get up every day. Our stories may not be identical. The cast of characters may not be identical, but everything is about earning. Things are about following one's dream. Things are about trying to get through the overwhelming sense of noise, of worldly opinion, of fighting for equity, fighting to be heard, all of the things that are built into us with regards to survival and the fear that accompanies with that. There is inherited ancestral trauma. Oh my God, there's so much that is now laying here on this table that we're talking about with regards to our fatigue and our overwhelm. And so I think the first thing to do with this is to see it for what it is, the shared experience. There is, believe it or not, there is help in allowing ourselves to realize that it's not just ours, to perhaps set down the idea that no one will understand my fatigue, because that is this paradoxical thing that actually prevents us from receiving the very thing that we hunger and crave for, which is to thrive, to feel fulfilled. If we personalize it so deeply and think that ours is special, then ironically it pushes away any relief from the problem itself. So we kind of want to start there. We want to centralize it in a way and understand that everybody is experiencing that. And we're experiencing it at different locations on the spectrum of the way in which it crashes into our individual and collective shores, but it's there. Okay, so we've acknowledged that. And so what that does is, when we see it for what it is, it's sort of the world, the human world, and we're going to have to walk through the human world. So we're going to walk through the fatigue, the overwhelm, the experience, the crashing and burning, the going for things, the disappointments, all of that collective history that kind of gnaws away at us. We're going to call that part the doing. And here's the thing that sometimes we forget, that our doing has become refined. Do you know what I mean? We do learn over time. We do learn from quote mistakes. And sometimes, however, in our learning, we can draw hard lines in the sand, and we can close our heart, and we can say things like never again. and it's best to not do those things, but experience does teach us. It refines what we would call our evolving wisdom. And so we learn as we're doing all of this thing, as we're walking through this land of being human. So we learn. And so all of that doing is necessary. It's part of our evolution. And let's say that you and I are at a place in our doing that knows a couple of things. We're better at understanding who we are. We're better at understanding our fears. We're better at understanding a little bit about what skill set and what path we want to pursue, because we now, through all of this doing, do have a preference about creativity, about what excites us. We do have a little bit of knowledge around all that because we've been around the block a few times. So all of the doing is not for naught, but now it has brought to us a little bit of this collection of wisdom. And so now we know a little bit about what we long for simply because of what we've lost. We now know what we want, we would like to experience simply because of the things that have brought us pain and suffering. And so it is all playing itself out to refine our wisdom. So here is the doing. And so as we have embarked upon this doing, does the doing get a little bit better? Absolutely. We kind of learn a better way for yes and a better way for no. We begin to see what feels like our tribe, and we begin to respond to that. We see what community draws to us, and we work at trying to be a part of that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So our doing is becoming a little bit more honed. Let me say it again. The doing is becoming a little bit more honed, more refined because of our years on the planet. Now, let's look at the doing in a different light. So in this doing, there has to be a little respite or a rest in the doing. And this is where the conversation or the old adage of Sabbath comes in. And that's really where this talk is leading to. It's about the value of something called Sabbath. It's more than just a biblical mandate. It is an inherent part, a necessary part of creation. Just as you have an exhale, you have to have an inhale. Just as you have an ebb, you have to have a flow. So as we, and I'm including you here, we're here talking about our fatigue, and the fatigue is because we've forgotten a little bit about the value of Sabbath. And we're going to break Sabbath down. We're going to dissect a little bit so that you can actually become excited about your new interpretation and your new application of Sabbath. Okay? So Sabbath can mean to rest in God. If you're not a religious person, or if God is a pain point for you, then rest in intelligence, rest in the creative flow. And so the doing is necessary. The doing is a psychological framework where we've taken all of our honed wisdom, and now we set our sights on the things that have the most meaning to us. It could be our wellness. It could be intimacy. It could be career. It could be the creative expression. It could be all kinds of things. And it could be all of those things at once, which most of the time it is. And so as we look at those things, those doings, we are to be in the doing. You know, we're supposed to make the calls. We're supposed to write the outlines. We're supposed to put ourselves out there. We're interfacing with the world. We're earning money. We're raising children. We're doing our craft. We're exploring. All of that thing is necessary. And then you add the Sabbath. And so in the biblical narrative, this is broken down by 6 days of doing, and then the seventh day is the day of rest, the resting in God. So to use the word days might throw this off a little bit because it's not a literal day. It's a psychological framework. The 6 days is a representation of time, the time of doing. The Sabbath is a moment where the doing stops, and now we reflect upon that doing and we rest in the mental embodiment that the doing is working itself out. Did you hear that? Sabbath, to rest in God, to rest in the knowledge. It's a releasing. Sabbath is a moment where we now go into the being, and we bring the doing into our being, and we see it within our mental framework, within the realm of our imaginative connection to the infinite. We see it as working out. We see it as a surrender. Now we've done our part, and now we give it over. We put it into the hands of creation that knows what to do with it far more than we do. We're still collaboration. We're still collaborating. We're still co-creating with it. We're doing our part. We're doing our part to the best of our ability and knowledge. But we're also wise enough to know that at some point we take our doing off, our hands of doing off. We take our bloody knuckled grip of panic or trying to force, and we put it into the being, or this Sabbath and this resting. And there is an activation in the being where we see it resolved. We see the highest good finding its way into its birth, into its blossoming, into its harvest. And that is a critical piece with how you and I are in harmony with the Creator. We're participating in the game of being human, and yet we're wise enough to know that there has to be a steady rhythm of Sabbath where we stop and pause and then release and give. And so it's not about, it's not this restrictive thing where we're not supposed to shop or eat this or do this thing. Sabbath is a part of a larger framework of understanding the principle of rhythm. And the fatigue that I talked about in the beginning is that we keep bypassing or forgetting the necessity for Sabbath. And so Sabbath for you may be a little bit different than my practice of Sabbath, but you hear me when I say it is a deliberate pause. A deliberate pause. So I want to share with you a little bit about the Old Testament version of Sabbath, and to realize that there's something far beyond just the words. So God, or Jehovah, if you break down the word Jehovah with the Hebrew alphabet, it is Jod, He, Va, He. Jod, He, Va, He. Within the word Jehovah, or Jod, He, Va, He, each of those syllables have a meaning. And the syllable of Va, V-A-U, actually means to nail or to join to creation. And so within the word of God, or within the word of Jehovah, is the pause to join, to nail or attach oneself to the wisdom and the power of the Creator. So in our human doing, we pause and join ourselves with Jehovah. We join in the relaxation of that. We bring our human offering to the wisdom that now takes the offering and produces a harvest that's far beyond anything that we might try to do by ourselves. Did you follow that? The fatigue, my fatigue, is in my forgetfulness of the Sabbath. My fatigue is in forgetting and being caught in the loop of the doing because of the noise, because of the fear, right? Because again, in the dualistic thing, it's easy to forget. But for every inhale of doing, there has to be an exhale. Sabbath is the exhale. It's the resting in God. So Sabbath for you might be a daily practice. It's not a seventh day after 6 days. It's not literal like that. It is putting your doing out, participating in the doing, showing up even when you're afraid. And yet with that, you would never do the doing without the being, without the resting. How many, oh my God, how many examples of that is there? That's the whole seed, soil, plant example. The soil is the gestation. The soil is the part of the being where we just have to trust that the seed is going to do its thing. And what happens is when you reunite yourself with a Sabbath practice, you and I become less fatigued because we're not then running upon this non-conscious thing that is subsisting in some type of hope. You know, the irony of hope is that when you show up with hope and you don't move beyond that, you also show up with its collaborator, which is doubt. Because you can't rest in hope because hope is not fully formed. It has the shared equation of, and it might not work out. And so when we remember Sabbath, we don't linger in hope anymore. What we do is we offer ourselves, we offer our talents, we offer the best that we can, and then we rest, not in hope, but in joining with that which knows. That's what Sabbath is. So what does that look like? It might mean that after a series of project, just the ongoing doing and the task of things, that there has to be a moment that is so valuable that we would never miss it. And so in that valuable moment, that moment of Sabbath, we now see all of our doing and we honor it. We reflect upon all of the phone calls, all the papers, all of the forms, all of the doing, all of the research, all of the getting people to school and all of the meals prepared. We see all of that. And then we pause and we give all of that like a beautiful little bundle, a gift, and we place it we join it into an energy. You could see it, you could see putting it on an altar, and you exhale when you put it on the altar and you say, okay, now do with that what you will. I release it. That's what Sabbath is, I believe. Sabbath is not a punitive thing where we have to deny ourselves. Sabbath is a necessary part of exhaling. And our fatigue, so much of the time, is we have forgotten to exhale. We're just still caught in the doing. It's like we won't walk away from the computer, or we don't stop planning the to-do list in our minds. And we stay up at night because we're so fraught in worry. You know, bedtime could be a Sabbath time. If you can't turn your mind off, you could then take all of the doing and you could see yourself giving that gift to God, resting in God, putting it down on something that is a symbol for you of the all-knowing. And you're just giving that back. I started thinking about Sabbath again because I'm rereading a lot of Neville Goddard. Neville Goddard was a 20th century spiritual writer and teacher whose emphasis is on imagination. I'm teaching a class right now around imagination and his technique. And I came upon some of his writings about Sabbath. And I'm going to leave you with this. He says, I'm going to make it gender neutral. We are warned if we fail to keep the Sabbath. For if we fail to enter into the rest of God, we also fail to receive the promise. We will fail to realize our desires. I'm going to pause there. We will fail to realize our desires if we're not including the ingredient of the Sabbath, because we will wear ourselves out. The reason for this is simple and obvious. There can be no mental rest until there is a conscious impression made. The conscious impression is the doing. Remember, we're doing the doing just fine. And if we fail to fully impress upon ourselves the fact that we now have heretofore the desire possessed, the doing, the action, and we continue to desire it, but there's now not a mental rest to take the desire and to give it to the formula that brings it to manifestation, which is the release of it, which is the submission of it, which is letting ourselves rest from our ego that thinks it knows what it's supposed to do. And so if we don't do that, then we fail to fully see the actualization of the harvest because we're trying to manage everything. So I want you this week to play around with the word Sabbath, to rest in God, to surrender, to submit. Think about it. If I'm taking a test and the test is a needed part of me elevating myself to a position, but if I take the test and I never submit it, then taking the test is irrelevant. It will never get me anywhere. So it's like we're constantly just taking tests, but we're never submitting the results of our doing. So I want you to think of submission, resting as Sabbath, and find ways in order to bring that back. Not in a way that's forced, not in a way that's punitive in any way, but in a way that is exhaled. Like, see yourself now, take all of the day's doing and give it over. Give it over, lay it down, let it be. Let it be. Let's write a song. Let it be. Let it be. There will be an answer. Let it be. So explore your Sabbath journey. Find ways to reclaim the idea that everything that you long for, you possess. You have the ability of both the inhale and the exhale. You have the ability to bring resolution to your own fatigue. And it's through remembering your communion and your resting in God. And so it is.